what you want to look for a 10-8 round at that point was 3Ds: dominance, duration, and damage. What's up, everybody? Laura Sanko here. Wanted to do a quick video on 10-8 rounds and how to understand them, and why some rounds that we think should be 10-8 rounds are not, and why some that are maybe shouldn't have been. So just want to get a more clear understanding of the way that 10-8 rounds are scored right now. And right now is the optimal word. Before I get going, I apologize if my voice is a little scratchy or if I sniff or hack along a little bit throughout this video. I've been pretty sick for the last couple days, but so just bear with me. If I'm sniffing in your ears, I'm sorry. So 10-8 rounds are always an interesting topic, I think, and they really are a more critical part of the overall scoring ecosystem than I think we often give it credit for, because we think of them, or at least I think of them, as being a rarity. And to some degree that is true, but because they are a rarity, and because there are when you really think about it, there are so few points awarded overall in a fight, or I should say there are so few differences in points awarded overall in a fight, a 10-8 round can really affect the outcome of a fight hugely. Just that 1 point difference can make a massive difference in the fight overall. So they are really important things to understand. And the biggest thing about understanding 10-8 rounds is understanding the changes that have gone on with how they are scored over the years. And there's really been three phases, particularly. The original phase, the back in the day, pre 2016-17, which is when the major overhaul to the criteria was made. So before that, the old school 10-8 round that we all know about, and that some of us are still stuck on, it was just absolute obliteration, right? It was basically one fighter had to die in order for the opponent to get scored a 10-8 round. It was extreme, and it almost never ever happened. It was so rare back then. When they made the overhaul, the major overhaul to the scoring criteria, and the other things that I've discussed in here, the ranking of the importance of different things, understanding what effective grappling and effective striking really means. Those changes were made around 2016, 2017. And at that time, they also did a much better job of delineating what a 10-8 round should be. And so here we go. When that change was made, and there are actually some changes that have been made since then. So stick with me through this video, because you're not going to get to what is currently being used until the very end. So after those changes were made, what you want to look for a 10-8 round at that point was 3Ds: dominance, duration, and damage. And that's still true today, although with some exceptions and some changes, which I'll talk about. So the 3Ds are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're considering scoring a 10-8 round: dominance, duration, damage. Dominance obviously is just clear winning of any given moment of a fight. Can be on the feet, can be on the ground. It's probably easier to delineate on the ground because you're normally going to be literally on top of someone, dominating them. It's very easy to see visually, but you can have dominance in the striking realm as well. Basically, when one person's being offensive and the other person just literally cannot get their offense off, that's being dominant. And then duration, of course, has to do with how long that dominance is taking place. Now, the thing about duration is it does not have to be the overwhelming majority of the fight, or of the round, excuse me. It doesn't have to be all 5 minutes. It doesn't even have to be 4 minutes. Now, you would certainly want it to be the majority, or a long section. And that's where we get into a little bit of subjectivity, because there is no definition of what duration means. There's no specific minute mark, but I would say anything over half the round, you're going to have of that consistent dominance. You're also going to have that duration factor. Now, the most important D is always damage. And we talk about damage when we talk about effective grappling and effective striking too. That word is so important in MMA because at the end of the day, this is a fight, and that's what we're here to do, is damage our opponent. I think one thing that is often a misconception when it comes to damage, though, is judges are not looking necessarily for cuts, swelling, bruises, etc. Those things are a symptom of damage being done, but they are not necessary for damage to have been done. So for instance, you get a knockdown, you're not going to see any evidence of that necessarily. A great example, I was just actually talking to Sean Sheehan, which, by the way, I look to him as the expert on many of these things, and I highly encourage you guys, if you are as nerdy about this stuff as I am, go check out his videos. He basically conveys a lot of the same information, but he might phrase things in a different way that helps you better understand it. So I highly encourage you to go seek out his videos. But excuse me, I was talking to him, and he gave a great example. He said, Justin Gaethje, for instance, against Rafael Fiziev, he barely had a mark on him, but he for sure took some damaging shots in that fight. I mean, he was wobbled at one point. So you can't just think, okay, the person that is cut up more or the person that is bleeding more, because if the other person got knocked down and one person got cut, but the punch or the elbow that cut them wasn't really that huge of a thing, then the knockdown is going to be more important than cuts. So point being, not all damage is created equal. And that is yet another area in which you're always going to have some amount of subjectivity and interpretation based on judge to judge. But that's kind of the guideline for what damage is. It's concussive blows, it's close submissions. And yes, sometimes that is evidenced by injuries like cuts and bruises and things like that. So the 3Ds: dominance, duration, and damage. Now, how do we apply those 3Ds? Or at least, how did we apply those 3Ds after the original changes or the major overhaul to the scoring criteria? If there are all 3Ds, then you definitely need to consider a 10-8 round. That's, again, there's going to be some amount of subjectivity there, but if you've got all 3Ds, you're probably going to score it a 10-8 round. If there was dominance, if there was damage in that dominance, if that dominance and that damage went on for a fairly long duration, that is going to be a 10-8 round. Now, if there's only 2Ds, then what judges are instructed to do is sort of consider. You have to at least consider a 10-8 round. And again, this is where we get into some subjectivity in whether some people would score it one way or some people would score it another way. But the point being that if you had 2 of the 3Ds, you needed to consider scoring that fight a 10-8. And if you had all 3, more than likely that's going to be a 10-8 round. Dominance, or excuse me, damage, of course, being the most important of the 3Ds. So if you have damage and duration, pretty high likelihood. If you have damage and dominance, pretty high likelihood. If it's only duration and dominance, that gets a little bit more gray, because quite often what you're describing when you say that, or at least what comes to mind for me, would be an instance what we all refer to as lay and pray. So if someone's on top, they're dominating, and they're doing it for a long time, they've got duration, but they're not doing any damage. That's not going to qualify as a 10-8 round. So that's what it was for 2017 through, I almost don't want to put a date on it because this is a pretty recent phenomenon, I want to say, as of late 2022. So like only a year and a half has this new viewpoint been sort of part of the judging ecosystem. As of about a year to a year and a half ago, the change was made that you have to have damage in order to score the round at 10-8, but not just have damage, you have to have clear and overwhelming damage. So basically what that did was, at the time, I think there was a feeling that maybe once the change was made, there was a swing toward perhaps too many 10-8 rounds. I don't necessarily agree with that, to be honest with you. I think more 10-8 rounds are probably needed because they help better define what a 10-9 round really is. But that's just, that's my personal take on things. Regardless, The commissions overall, the major commissions, I think felt like there were a few too many 10-8 rounds going on. So there is no official change to the verbiage currently in the scoring criteria. You're going to still see dominance, duration, and damage, and you're not going to see necessarily the specifics that I'm talking about. But these are the things that are instructed during the meetings, for the various commissions. There are things that are talked about between the top level judges where they kind of get on the same page with each other. So it's not written down, but I can assure you that this is very much a part of the current look at 10-8 rounds, and that is you have to have overwhelming damage in order to score that round a 10-8 round. It does push us back slightly more toward the old school look at 10-8, but not nearly. I mean, I consider the old school 10-8 almost what I would call a 10-7 now. It used to be so rare. And like I said, one guy basically had to be on the death's door for the other guy to get 10-8. So it's not there. But it has become a little bit more of a conservative look at scoring 10-8s. So if you've noticed, for instance, that there was maybe this 4 or 5 year period where you were starting to see more 10-8s, that was a reflection of the change in the criteria that happened in 2016, 2017. And now you're probably going to see a slight reduction in them because the criteria necessary has been heightened a little bit in terms of you have to have this really overwhelming, clear-cut damage along with either dominance or duration in order to score a 10-8 round. I hope that helps. It's a very complex topic, and I do know that they are looking to update the verbiage. I think this is an ongoing discussion for a lot of people, and I think people see it differently. A lot of people want the 10-8s to be a little bit more old school, and a lot of people really liked the change that was made in 2016, 2017 that allowed for a little bit more liberal usage of the 10-8s. That's kind of where I sit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right. Certainly doesn't mean that I'm the end all be all on this, because I'm not part of any of the commissions, and I know those guys are very knowledgeable, and they know what they're doing. So I certainly look to them to see these changes made. But I also like the fact, that over the last year they've put together, the ABC has put together a panel of former fighters that's going to be part of the ABC convention that will be a voice, I guess, of the fighter's perspective, the current fighter's perspective on a lot of these issues. I know Dean Thomas is involved in it. He and I have talked about it. So I'm excited for there to be a little bit more of a clear representation, a face that I can point to say, okay, Dean's there. He's been in these situations. He's been in the octagon. I can trust that, that voice is being represented. Whether the change is made or not, I don't know. That has yet to be seen, but yeah, that is the current state of 10-8s. So 3Ds, dominance, duration, damage, but you did a lot of damage. That's the major takeaway here. Thanks, guys.